There is another type that we use most frequently in Dart, and that is a Boolean type. For example, if I want to store a status of a person's marital or marriage status, so I have to declare a variable of type bool. This is short for Boolean, and say is married, and here I have to assign either true or false. Okay, and also you can print this variable, and true or false will be printed. And also we saw that a Boolean true false is returned when we actually execute an expression. Like, for example, if I want to print, say, print this age variable equal 20, for example, and we know that we assign 20 in this age variable. So this expression will be executed, and from here, either true or false will be returned. If I run this application, you will see that it says true. So this is the Boolean type, and these are the most basic types in Dart. Like I say, we use them most frequently. There are other types we use, we don't use them quite often, like rims and symbols, and I'm not going to talk about that. If you are interested, you always can go to the pub.dev, Dart.dev, the official documentation for Dart, and take a look at those data types. I'm going to talk about something else now. You saw that whenever we declare a variable, we assign a data type in front or before the name of the variable. For example, int, double, num, string, etc. We don't always have to specify the data type explicitly in Dart. For example, let me define another variable over here. Say var name equals, for example, Dart. So as you can see, I didn't specify the data type directly. We know that this is a string, but I didn't use string. Instead, I used var. So var is a short for variable, and we can actually use this keyword in place of data type. That means we don't have to specify the data type explicitly. We can use just a var keyword in front of the variable. And we can actually check the type of this variable, and we can ask Dart for that. For example, if I want to print the runtime type of this name variable, I can do this by calling a function called runtime type. And if I now run this, you will see that Dart can actually compile this variable, and it can actually determine the type. So it says string, and it's very easy for Dart because Dart only looks what kind of data we assigned in this variable. So we have assigned a string, and then Dart assumes that this is actually of type string. But you have to be careful that whatever value you assign at the first place, you cannot assign a different type in this name variable. For example, if I try to assign a different type, for example 20 or maybe Boolean, then Dart will not allow that. So as long as we declare a variable by using var, and then whenever we try to assign something, we can assign anything. That means a string, an integer, or double, or even Boolean, or even a list. So by specifying a variable name with var, we can actually specify anything. But once we specify, and after that, we cannot actually change the data type. So whatever we assign at the first place, Dart will treat that data type as the type of this variable. Now you can ask that whenever we should, or when actually we should use or explicitly define the data type, or when we actually should use the var keyword. It actually depends, and you can always use the data types. You can always explicitly define the data types. Always you can use the var keyword, but there are some places where you must have to specify the data types, especially when we declare a variable of the type null or a nullable variable. And I will talk about nullable types in Dart or nullable variables in later videos. But if you don't declare a null type value or variable, or if you don't want to assign the value immediately, then you need to specify the data type explicitly. But for other cases, you just keep going by specifying a variable with var. There is actually another, let me just provide a string here. So there is another keyword that we can use instead of var, and that is dynamic. So we know that once we assign anything inside a var type variable, we cannot assign a different type. But if we declare a variable, for example, I'm declaring a variable and I'm using a key called dynamic, and let me define the variable name, for example, phone, and then you can assign a string, for example, a phone number, like I'm using the code like +0 +88 and then the number. Okay, so now I have declared a variable of type dynamic and I have assigned a string, and you can actually check that by calling this runtime type method over this phone property. If I just copy this and paste it over here, and if I run this, it will definitely print string. Okay, but the main difference between var and dynamic is we can assign other type of values inside this phone variable, for example, true. So at the first place, I have assigned a string, then Dart evaluates this as a string, and then in the very next line, or maybe at later execution or anywhere else, you can actually assign any other type in this phone variable, and that's why it is dynamic. And now that I have assigned a true in this phone variable, if I run this once again, you will see that Dart will treat this phone variable as a boolean. So in case of dynamic, whatever value you put at last, that will be the type of that variable. So it doesn't matter what you put at the first place, Dart will always check whatever you put at the last place, and that will be actually the type of that variable. So this is the basic difference between var and dynamic. And once again, I want to tell you that it entirely depends on situation, whether you explicitly specify the data types or use var or dynamic, and it will be very clear to you whenever we build application using Flutter, and when we build app, we need to declare many types of variables, and then you will see me to that I will use, sometimes I will explicitly use the data types, sometimes I will use var or dynamic, and at that situation, at that point, it will be clear to you, because at that time I will be doing real-time application with real data, and at that situation it will be very clear to you whenever or where we should actually use the data type explicitly or use the var or dynamic keywords.